New funding for fuel efficiency projects from the federal government.
When does climate change become a human rights issue? You'll be surprised at the answer. I'm Diva Ambani, and I'll take a look coming up.
And President Obama's energy and climate czar talks about a clean energy economy.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good afternoon, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report. The federal government is providing $187 million in funding for 9 projects to improve fuel efficiency of heavy trucks and passenger vehicles. Speaking today in Columbus, Indiana, Secretary of Energy Stephen Chu said the new technologies, once fully implemented, could save more than 100 million gallons of imported oil a day. Chu spoke at one of the companies selected, Cummins, which makes truck, diesel, and gasoline engines. Other companies selected include Daimler, Ford, Chrysler, and GM. The transport sector accounts for 28% of total U.S. energy use. Well, warmer temperatures cooled off commodities prices today. Natural gas plunged 5% as forecasters said the brutal cold snap around the country is coming to an end. Checking numbers on the NYMEX now, natural gas closed down 29 cents to $5.46 per 1,000 cubic feet. Oil rose above the $83 mark this morning before settling the day at $82.52 a barrel, down 23 cents. Cleanup continues this afternoon at an oil pipeline leak in northeastern North Dakota. This happened late Friday night when about 3,000 barrels of crude oil spilled from a pipeline that transports oil from Manitoba to Wisconsin. Enbridge Energy says all of the oil was contained within the pipeline's right-of-way and that no water or wildlife has been contaminated. The pipeline is shut down between Cromer and Clearbrook, Minnesota. Well, it is nearly a year since President Obama took office, and the White House has top officials holding online chats this week to try to publicize the administration's accomplishments. Talking today was Carol Browner, President's climate czar, as she is known to be among some. Margaret Ryan's been listening, and she is here with us now to talk a little bit more. So, what are the accomplishments the administration here is talking about?
Well, pretty much what you'd expect. Headlining the Recovery Act, more than $80 billion for renewable and advanced energies and various technologies, electric vehicles in particular. They were talking about the smart grid to enable more consumer choice and more renewables. They talked about efficiency, big thing, efficiency in autos, because of course this administration put out the first joint tailpipe standards and mile per gallon standards. They talked about appliances. There were laws on the, Carol Browner pointed out, there were laws on the books, and new rules simply hadn't been issued by the Department of Energy to make appliances more efficient. And that's everything from your home appliances to commercial appliances. The offshore, they talked about wind, not oil, but wind possibilities offshore. And in federal government agency sustainability, Browner pointed out that that President Obama had signed an executive order that orders every single agency, large and small, to cut its energy use to find ways to be more efficient.
So a decent list of accomplishments. Any interesting questions come her way?
Yes, it really was. There was a moderator who was taking the questions over the internet, and so it wasn't clear exactly who was asking the questions. They did get a question about whether it wouldn't have been better to get a real treaty, a firm treaty out of Copenhagen. And Browner said, look, I was there with the president, and what we did was still a notable accomplishment. Sure, a firm treaty would have been better, but getting China and India to come into the fold in a way to say we are going to do things and we'll commit to do things, that was a huge accomplishment, she said. And what we need to turn our attention to now, while we still engage with the rest of the world, is getting our legislation in place and making sure we're ready so that if the opportunity comes along for the firm treaty, whenever that happens, our legislative situation is ready. As you know, most of the last 2 years, the U.S. has had to sit there and say, you know, we don't have anything from Congress, so we can't commit to anything. 2 other questions were in natural gas and in nuclear power. She was asked about whether that particular, in the natural gas, for instance, would be in more use, and she said, yeah. She said, we do need to break our foreign oil dependence, that the natural gas finds, the shale finds, have been significant, much larger than anticipated, that a lot of vehicle fleets have been converting to that. She did say she saw it only as a bridge fuel, that she didn't see it as the end result. She thought, for instance, electric vehicles should be the end goal. But she said natural gas needs to be a bigger part of our energy future than it is now. On nuclear, she said, she said the president believes nuclear is a necessary part of the energy future. She said she almost was apologetic about it because I don't think Browner's never been a big booster of nuclear. And she said, but we have to, when we have this climate problem, we have to be open to all sources of clean energy. And she said, we haven't built a new plant in the U.S. recently, and her quote here was, we want to make that happen in the near future.
No mention of Yucca Mountain.
No mention of Yucca Mountain at all.
So,
no.
So how about wind? Wind got some attention. What about offshore wind? And did she talk about the administration's position on Cape Wind, which is getting attention this week?
No, she didn't. And I sort of wished a question had gotten in there about it. Maybe there was some waiting in the queue. She just mentioned that the Interior Secretary was very involved in this, that the U.S.'s offshore wind resources are huge, and tapping into them would be very important to renewable energy. But you know, nothing about how the Cape Wind decision might come down.
Right, right. Well, it was all about accomplishments anyway.
It was
that
indeed.
Was the point. Okay, Margaret Ryan, thanks for that. In other news, human rights advocates are calling for new international climate law to protect tens of millions of folks worldwide they say are displaced from their homes because of natural disasters caused by climate change. Clean Skies' Dee Bombani is here with more. Dee.
Hi, that's right. Some climate experts claim that in the past year alone, an estimated 50 million people have been displaced. They say those will grow into the hundreds of millions by 2050. At a meeting of the American Society of International Law in Washington today, human rights advocates said protection might be on the way. It's likely to come in the form of a new convention that protects victims displaced by natural disaster that have to move across international borders. Human rights advocates talked a great deal about how a new climate change framework developed in Copenhagen in December needs to develop further to include protection for those displaced victims of natural disasters. The UN Secretary General's representative on human rights of internally displaced persons says he's working on that language that would offer real support to the victims. He says right now there are only 2 conventions to protect displaced people. The first, developed in 1951, only protects refugees that have to leave home because of persecution. The other convention was created in 1990 and protects migrant workers that have to leave their home country to find work. He says there needs to be something, though, for victims of climate change.
These people are not refugees, they are not persecuted by the government. That's why they are not protected by the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees. They are not economic migrants. There is a Convention on the Rights of Migrant Workers and their families. But migrant workers are people defined as those who are looking for a job in another country. These people are not looking for a job, they are looking for safety, they are looking for a place to live. It means we have a huge gap as regards those displaced across international borders, a gap that must be closed. We need new international law. We need a debate about what that law could be. And as long as we don't have that law, we need countries, governments to be ready to grant at least temporary protection to these people.
Nicalan says he hopes world climate discussions in Mexico City in December of this year will flesh out the Copenhagen Accord to include legal protection for disaster victims. He said Copenhagen certainly created a fund to help developing countries adapt to climate change, but none of that cash is directed at people that have to start over in foreign countries. Susan?
All right, interesting. Dee Bombani, thank you. Well, the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. More than a Bible verse to one Iowa church. Lutheran Church of Hope in West Des Moines unveiled a $12,000 wind turbine Sunday as parishioners flocked to service. The 30-foot tall spire will cut the church's energy bills by an estimated 25%. It's the first of its kind in the area and the second wind spire at a church in the state. Let's take a look now at some energy goings-on around the Beltway tomorrow. 9:45, Chamber of Commerce President Thomas Donahue delivers the State of American Business Address. He's supposed to highlight the business community's green jobs accomplishments. Clean Skies News will be there. 10 a.m., the Black Enterprise and Shell present an energy forum at the Liaison Capitol Hill featuring EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson. Clean Skies News will be there. 3 p.m., the Info Shop of the World Bank hosts a forum on bioenergy development. That's the Energy Report. Thanks for joining us here in the Energy News Center. For any suggestions or comments about our programming on Clean Skies News, you can find us at contact@cleanskies.com. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook, too. I'm Susan McGinnis. This is Clean Skies News.